Lakes and rivers are drying up faster than expected. Temperature extremes seem more pronounced. And by most accounts, the climate crisis is coming on a lot faster and sooner than most of the forecasts had predicted. So now what? Well, a group of U.S. military veterans are asking Congress to make some changes in terms of how the military contributes to all of this. And joining us to talk about it is Chris Velazquez. He is the digital organizer of Veterans for Peace. Chris, good of you to join us. First, tell me, how did this group come together?
So Veterans for Peace has been around since the 80s. It comes out of the Vietnam Veterans Against the War, a long legacy of veterans that have been mobilizing and moving within peace movement and anti-war work and have a long legacy of doing that. The work around the climate has evolved over time as veterans have identified the issues that has arisen from our participation in war around the world.
And those issues include essentially a total lack of transparency by the U.S. military in terms of how it contributes to climate change.
You could call it a lack of transparency. We refer to it as a black box. We know that the U.S. is one of the largest has the largest carbon footprint in the world when it comes to carbon production, and that's just based off of oil sales and fossil fuel sales to the military. It is a complete black box with no actual transparency about the impact of military missions, what war actually does, the uses of Agent Orange, burn pits. The PACT Act was just passed, and that has to do with environmental collapse and environmental contaminants. So we know that the military and war in and of itself is one of the leading causes of climate crisis that we face today.
And you mentioned burn pits. Given all the attention that burn pits recently got in the legislation that went through Congress, I think a lot of Americans might be surprised to learn that actually the military, okay, maybe there's concern about how to help veterans after they've been exposed to burn pits, but there doesn't seem to be much action that's been taken to decrease burn pits, to limit the amounts of nuclear waste, or all the other ways that the military contributes to this.
That's absolutely true. And part of that goes into this concept of greenwashing the military, where we try to obfuscate the harm that is done by replacing our Humvee fleet with electric Humvees without actually addressing the root causes. The military has recognized, the U.S. government has recognized that environmental contaminants like burn pits are pervasive and affect everybody, the local nationals, the military members that are there near them, the soil, the air, the water systems that are near these burn pits and these contaminants, without actually any work on decreasing the emissions or the underlying causes of.
And why is that? Why is it so difficult for the military of all institutions to try to tackle some of the problems that it's creating?
I think for two reasons. The first reason is, as the being a former Marine myself, I'm going to look back at Smedley Butler, who said war is a racket. It is in the best interest of the military-industrial complex companies, the companies that get profit, to maintain the system of war that we have right now.
Not only continue getting all the money that it's getting and not sort of making dramatic changes, but also the sort of underlying need for the military to be seen as having anything wrong with it?
That's true. Yes, that, and it has to do with the military has long known and recognized that the climate crisis is an issue. The DoD has released long reports of referring to climate crisis as the new frontier of warfare, and decided to focus on a strategy of an armed lifeboat strategy, which reinforces border strength. It has no real addressment for climate refugees or anything. It's an insular isolationist policy. And we saw that over years with Trump, and continued with the children that are still in cages at border right now, and to this day. And that furthers the military industrial complex profits, because that's who is profiting from it.
Yeah, and those sort of profits, of course, and we're talking about a budget of, close to $1 trillion a year now. And it sounds like your group is not only asking for the budget to be cut, but also the existing money that the Pentagon gets, the DoD gets, to shift its priorities.
Yes, there's a movement for conversion. The same companies that are doing Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Elbit systems, the technology that they're making can be utilized to further civilian industries without focusing on war. They can also convert that budget into actually meeting the material conditions of the civilian population that lead to strife within the world. We must convert our policy and our procedures procedures and our technology to actually providing adaptable solutions going forward, instead of just furthering the usage of drone warfare to drop bombs on innocent civilians overseas.
Now, a lot of people are perhaps familiar that this latest bill that went through Congress has given a lot of money towards climate change. The deal that Joe Biden just signed, there's been a law that's just passed in California that will require all vehicles within, I think it's 10 years, to go from gas combustion to all electric. Do those things impact the military? Can they impact the military?
There's underlying issues with that bill in and of itself. It guaranteed a certain amount of leased lands going to fossil fuel extraction. It guaranteed that. Also, going to all EV vehicles still has an extractive resource component to it. We are extracting more and more resources, cobalt, lithium, to produce batteries. We're still producing vehicles. We still are operating inside a commodity system that doesn't actually address the root causes of transportation issues or address the individual needs, and doesn't degrowth or actually provide adaptable solutions. It maintains the status quo, and that shift in the civilian sector is also going to occur inside the military, where we'll see more emphasis on nuclear submarines or nuclear powered systems. But while we have 800 military bases around the world that are still polluting and conducting their missions, Abram tanks, our vehicle fleet has to do maintenance testing, and that includes just idling our tanks in the middle of the desert and just polluting for hours on end, burning JP8, which is a type of jet fuel. So it doesn't shift and doesn't solve the problems of how the military contributes to the climate crisis, just both in maintaining their standing military and in the military tempo of warfare.
Chris, when you talk to other military veterans about this, what's been the reaction, and has the reaction, say, changed over the past few years?
I think there's a bit of it goes both ways. I think a lot of people a lot of veterans are very well aware of what they went through while they were in service, and know what it is, but they don't have a lot of people supporting that message that pushes back on that rampant militarism or military glorification in civilian society. So for a veteran coming home, it is easier to buy into accepting that military glorification, that worship as being a veteran, instead of going, our service was really terrible. We saw a lot of things. We were exposed to a lot of things, and the climate is affected by it. I think veterans are more apt to find that accepting camaraderie around that idea, and are receptive to it when you start talking about it, and you break it down into how it affects them after they've gotten out, and how it affected them when they went in, and due to reasons of the economic draft and things like that, people are more apt to talk about their military service in honest terms.
And what about political leaders? Which political leaders that we may know of are advocates for what you're trying to do, and who are the surprises that may not be returning your calls?
Representative Barbara Lee has worked with Veterans for Peace and has done some amazing work over the years. There's a House resolution that I'm blanking off the top of my head right in this moment that has put forth for an audit for some transparency surrounding climate emissions of the U.S. military. AOC and the squad have also been supportive. Ayanna Pressley has worked with various members of Veterans for Peace amongst other issues as well. And we could very easily point at the typical figures of Joe Manchin being hesitant and the pushback around and maintaining a link to fossil fuels. And
you know, when I hear you talk about, Barbara Lee and her effort to simply have an audit, it's hard to imagine how could anybody be against an audit simply to find out, well, what sort of carbon footprint is the military spewing out there? And then if they want to have a debate about whether the military should transfer away from fossil fuels to something else, that's separate. But again, the reluctance that so many members of Congress have simply to find out more about what our military is doing seems puzzling.
It absolutely is, and the military operates inside this chamber, this protective bubble that is shielded by lack of transparency. We know that the F-35 program, as a jet program, has absolute failure. It is not a plane that is ready to fly, or it's not a program, and that's been a long trend inside the military. When I was in the Osprey, it was a huge issue. And they went through many iterations, and it was a pipe dream project, and it finally hit the fleet and was usable. But that is the same kind of mindset and practice that allows the military to hide its carbon emissions and its uses of fossil fuels.
Are you an optimist or pessimist when it comes to seeing the military make a change?
I am an optimist because the movement is showing that people are again more and more. The trend is that recruiters are having trouble hitting recruitment goals. The military is hurting in that regard. More and more public opinion and the younger generation is pushing back on the acceptance of the military. I am an optimist that there will be change. I think it comes with a cultural revolution and a change in our politics, though.
Well, I hope you are right. And that is an interesting point, that the military as an institution, if it wants to be able to attract the best and brightest of the future, it's got to change itself. Chris Velazquez, Veterans for Peace digital organizer. Chris, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate you being on the program.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.